Hi, so I'm Karen Figueroa, and I will be interviewing Ed Delgado. And today is October 31st of 2019. So please, Ed, what is your full name? And you name after anyone.
My name is Edward Fraijo Delgado. And my middle name is actually my maternal mother's last name, but
Okay,
all of us have used, all my siblings have that as part of our family tradition.
nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Where were you born?
I was born in Arizona
Mm-hmm.
in a small mining town on October the 13th, Friday, October the 13th, 1944, with my
Wow.
twin brother.
Okay, wow, awesome. How did your family come to live there? How did they arrive
Mhm.
there? Were they originally from there or?
No, actually, my parents, uh, on my mother's side, and the parents on my father's side, all came from Mexico, and they all arrived in Arizona about 1917.
Mm-hmm.
And on my mother's side, my grandfather was a master mechanic, so he made tools and replacement parts for railroads.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather was a miner, a copper miner in Mexico, so he already came with that kind of experience. So they actually went through some mining towns in Arizona
Mm-hmm.
before they actually arrived in my hometown in Superior.
Wow.
So my parents arrived in Superior probably about 1930s, and my grandparents on my dad's side also probably 1920s. Um, yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
Anything special that you remember about the house that you grew up with or
Oh,
your neighborhood?
yeah, absolutely. The first house that I was born into, my father and mother built it.
Wow.
And my mother went to the bank, and she had worked as a housekeeper
Mm-hmm.
for a banker, so she knew him. And she went and asked for $5,000 to build a house.
Wow.
And the banker laughed. And he said, "You're going to build a house for $5,000? Are you sure?"
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Yeah, we can build a house for $5,000. So he said, because I know you and I know your family, I'm going to lend you the $5,000 because I want to see what you can build."
Wow.
So they actually built. It was a square
Mm-hmm.
with 4 rooms, and I remember it was a master bedroom, a bedroom for my sister and my brother and I,
Mm-hmm.
a living room, and a kitchen. And the house was divided into 4.
Mm-hmm.
Had a little porch in the front and some tiny steps in the front
Mm-hmm.
and in the back,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the house. It was a wonderful house, and the wonderful thing I remember about the house is that it had a tin roof,
Mm-hmm.
so when it rained, it was really noisy inside because you could hear all the rain hitting.
Right.
But some special things about the house.
Nice.
Yeah.
The rain is nice.
Yeah.
So you already shared a little bit about your family, but tell me more. What was it growing up with them?
Yeah.
How was those growing up years?
Yeah. The town that I grew up in was only about 5,000 people.
Okay.
And so my father's family, I think all but one brother
Mm-hmm.
was living there, and the sisters were already married and gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I had lots of cousins on my dad's side. And on my mother's side, I had one uncle and one aunt, and they had lots of kids. So we had lots of cousins. And all of my cousins on my mother's side and half of my cousins on my dad's side were all from the church. So we were real close. And I mean, real close. The family was in and out of the house all the time, and especially in and out of the church.
Mm-hmm.
I remember good times with them. I remember family events where the house was packed, kids sleeping on the floor all over the place,
Right.
all the adult men sitting in the back in a garage in a circle, sharing stories and some music,
Okay.
and some of their favorite drinks. And on my mother's side, just lots and lots of food.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the parties and events were either at my aunt's house or at who lived across the street from us,
Mm-hmm.
in the second house that my dad built, or at the church.
Okay.
And the church was always lots and lots of people and lots of family.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned about your twin brother. You have
Right.
any more siblings?
I have two sisters. I have an older sister. Her name is Betty,
Mm-hmm.
and she's 4 years older than I am. And I have a younger sister, Irene. I think she's 6 years younger than we are.
Okay.
And then my twin brother, Sam.
Sam.
Mm.
Okay, great. How about your nuclear family? You got married and had kids.
Okay, so
Share a little bit about them.
okay, so I'm married to Linda,
Mm-hmm.
and we've had 3 kids. We have Sergio and Rita and Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
So the 3. We did have others, but they didn't make it. But
Mm-hmm.
we have three
Okay.
kids and lots of grandchildren.
That's a grandchildren. Yeah. And how was growing up? How was family? How different was family? You growing up with your own parents and siblings and all, and then with them, with your wife and kids.
It was actually really quite different.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it was different is because growing up with my parents and growing up in a small town of 5,000 people, we knew everybody and everybody knew us. And so, you know, and everything revolved around either the family or the church
Mm-hmm.
or the school.
Mm-hmm.
And we never moved from there. And the first house that we lived in was my dad built. We
Mm-hmm.
moved from that house when we were 4 years old, as he was building the new house.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived in that house until I left home to go to the university. So living at home was always very, very stable.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I had an unstable home compared to my parents' home because both of us, immediately after finishing university, we started moving. And we took on professions, and she was a teacher, and she taught in high school and taught at junior college, and did some things like that. And I taught for a few years, and then I went on to work for a business
Mm-hmm.
and did that for about 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that point on, we continued our studies. I continued an MBA,
Mm-hmm.
International Business, which then took us to different parts of the world. And so we were never in one place for long.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably going to ask me how many years we've been married.
Mm-hmm.
So
Go ahead.
we've been married for 53 years.
Wow, that's wonderful.
And in those 53 years, my wife and I have moved 33 times.
Oh my goodness.
So you compare that.
You can do the math.
Yeah, compare 33 times to 2 times
Wow.
with my parents. That's a
Yeah,
huge difference.
that
And
is.
the other big difference is that with my parents, we were close to family always. My wife and I, up until recently, were never close to family because we were living in different parts of the world.
Okay.
So it was very, very different.
Okay, good. You mentioned church.
Hmm.
So what is your church background and how did that shape your faith?
Okay. I think we were very fortunate
Mm-hmm.
because both families on my father's side and on my mother's side accepted the Lord and became Christians before we were born. On my grandmother's side, and with my dad, My great-grandmother was a Christian. My grandparents were Christians. They all went to church. Their whole family went to church. They were active in youth group. And and my mother, who went to the same churches, and her mother were all Christians. Okay. And so we grew up in church. Almost every event was church. But the interesting thing about that is that most of my teaching in the church was the Sunday school teachers were almost always either a cousin or an aunt or an uncle or my mom. So my mom was my Sunday school teacher many, many times, and she was really, really good. She was a very good teacher. One of my cousins that passed away recently, she was very, very good. Her husband was a very good teacher and youth group leader. Some of the men that were leaders, because we grew up in one church, but there were 3 churches that always did everything together. They were all from mining towns. They were separated by 28 miles. It was 20 miles away, and then 18 miles away, and then our town. So we did a lot together. And within those 3 churches, there were always lots of leaders. And there were young men and women leaders. So we were really impacted by that kind of leadership and style and life and fun. And, there was always some activity. Right. Always. It was fun activity with them. Yeah.
Now, what denomination was that?
It was Presbyterian.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And how did that shape your faith? Just a little bit about that.
Well, as a child, the pastor of those 3 churches, his last name was Banuelos. He was always discipling men to be leaders, and because he was pastoring 3 churches, those leaders were taking turns going from to the other 2 churches. So every Sunday we had a different leader come that he was discipling, our pastor, and then he would come, I think, every 3rd Sunday, and I highly admired him. Him and his wife, and to be real honest with him, he was a model for me, and I always wanted to be like him. To this day, I remember him very, very fondly as a person that was not only I didn't see him as a model necessarily because he was a preacher. I saw him and his wife as models because they were invested in people. And not only were they invested in people and visiting people and working with people and listening to people and then involved with the kids and Sunday school or vacation Bible school, but the leaders that they were forming were modeling what they were learning from him. And one of the interesting things is that because he lived in the next town from us, he spent more time with those leaders. And 3 of those leaders, three of those leaders eventually would have been my relatives because of my wife. So one of them was my wife's father. Another one was my wife's uncle. And then another one was my cousin's husband. They were a bit older than we were, but actually there was one more. Also, the father of one of my wife's cousins. And there were people that I highly, highly admired. My parents were very close friends with one of those families. And so not only did we see them in real life and at the pulpit, but we saw them sometimes plastering walls or working in the garden or visiting people, or playing baseball, or volleyball, or just playing games and laughing. So we got to see them in real life, and that, for me, was part of the models that impacted my life, but also some of the things that impacted my life were like services. They would have I was a little kid, services on Thursday, and the pastor would come in. He always had some kind of a series, and they not only had series, but they had Bible memory verses, and I think that I was very young. I was so competitive that I think that they really wished I hadn't been there. Because I always put my hand up, and my mom would sometimes go like, give somebody else a chance. Yeah. Awesome. So my life was absolutely shaped by the church, the congregation, the people, and I think my real life. It was real life. Yeah.
Well, I like what you said, that they were involved in. It was not just a religious service; it was a lifestyle.
It absolutely was.
And
it was.
awesome.
I mean, if somebody made cake, we thought it was going to be because there's going to be some special event at church.
Yeah.
We never thought it was going to be for us, which was fine.
Yeah.
Because we got to eat it anyway.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely a lifestyle. It was fun. It was real. It was not unusual that one of those pastors would come to preach on Sunday, and then after Sunday, they would end up in one of our aunt's houses or our house, and we'd be having fun until evening with them and their kids. It was normal.
That's great. Well, I know that you mentioned that you went to the university, and so to share a little bit about what you studied, but also within that, then when did you receive the call to full-time ministry or to be in ministry?
Okay. Well, I think, first of all, let me go to the call in ministry. I think I received that call when I was about 6 years old.
Oh, that's awesome.
Really. I knew from about the age of 6 that what I saw, I liked. And I've always said that I wanted to be like them, but I didn't realize that really it was to be like Jesus.
Right.
But the models were
They
so
were modeling
healthy.
that for you.
Yeah. They were so healthy, so good, and they were men and women.
Yeah.
And so I really believe my call to ministry was at about the age of 6. The university, that was a whole different world for me. My parents, because they were challenged financially. My mom grew up with her father died when she was 8. So my grandmother actually raised the family by herself. My grandmother had no education whatsoever. Although when my grandmother accepted the Lord, she learned how to read and write in the church.
Wow.
And then it was through the church that, because she learned how to read and write, she read the Bible so many times, that she was, by the time I knew her, she was a Bible teacher. And she would be called to different conferences. She'd be giving Bible courses. But that was an innate church thing, never school. My mom, because they had no money, she graduated from 8th grade, was an excellent student. She won the Citizenship Award and all kinds of things in 8th grade. She went to first day of high school, and she realized she couldn't do it. First of all, at that time, they had to buy books, they had to buy paper, and they had to buy pencils. And she said she only had one dress.
Wow.
So she knew that she could not keep going. So she had to drop out of school, and that was a major hardship for her. For my dad, his parents could do it, but they still came with the mindset that all the boys are supposed to work.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad went through, completed his third year of high school, but his home was so rough as far as the demand for him to work that they really made it very
Mm-hmm.
difficult for
Mm-hmm.
him.
Mm-hmm.
So my father actually left home when he was a junior
Mm-hmm.
to, and this is all part of the story.
Right.
He left home when he was a junior to go work for the Civilian Conservation Corps, which is a huge thing in America at that time.
Wow.
And he ended up in Colorado, but then came back, and they married young. I think my parents were in the 22, 19. I think my mom was 19. My dad was about 21 or 22.
Mm-hmm.
And they got married, and my dad started working as a copper miner.
Oh.
My mom, a house mom,
Mm-hmm.
but they never forgot their dream to go to school. So
Okay.
they basically, what they did is they put that dream into us,
Right.
And everything that they did is you must go study, and really they made sure that we were
Right.
prepared.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because they wanted two things.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted us to speak Spanish because my home is
Mm-hmm.
Spanish speaking. They wanted us to speak Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
proper Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
and they also wanted to make sure that we would learn English. So at the age of 4.5 or 5, all my brother and I, my older sister, already gone, and then eventually my younger sister went.
Mm-hmm.
We all went to a little place called the Little Red Schoolhouse
Mm-hmm.
with a teacher by the name of Margaret Lister, who was an expert at teaching English
Mm-hmm.
for Latino kids. And
Wow.
so we were 8 of us in the
Mhm.
school,
Hmm.
and from that point on, we were prepared. We were prepared for first grade. Our English was good. We knew
Mhm.
our alphabet. We knew our numbers. We knew everything. We're ready for first grade. And all those years going through school, I think that readiness really helped us
Mm-hmm.
in order to prepare even for college. There's a lot of stories between that time.
Mm-hmm.
One of the interesting stories is that my hometown
Mm-hmm.
in Arizona was divided,
Hmm.
and so it was only Latino and non-Latino,
Mm-hmm.
and the Latinos had to go to one school, non-Latinos went to the other.
Wow.
Latinos went to one Protestant church, non-Latinos went to another.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, when we went to the first grade, in spite of the fact that we 8 of us were already prepared for school,
Mm-hmm.
First grade was divided into 1A, 1B, and 1C. And if you were Latino, you automatically went to the 1C.
Wow.
And the 1C was a Latino teacher. There were, I think, only 2 Latino teachers in the whole school system.
Mm-hmm.
And it was supposed to be like the bad grade. It was nothing. So my brother and I went to the 1C,
Mm-hmm.
but we were so prepared. And those 8 of us that went to that school,
Mm-hmm.
the next year they put us in the 1A. We didn't even get to go to the 2.
Wow.
That was normal. So we had to do first grade twice
Mm-hmm.
because we were Latino, but we were by that time things were starting to change.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to go to the 1A,
Mm-hmm.
and then we went to the 2A,
Mm-hmm.
and then when we went to the 3, everything changed. And I think it was Martin Luther King and all that stuff was going on,
Mm-hmm.
and everything was changed. And my brother and I, being twins, they divided us. So he went to the teacher that had been a 3B, and I went to the teacher who went to 3A. My teacher was outstanding, and my brother's teacher was horrible.
Oh no.
Anyway, but as horrible as she was, My brother had a real knack for numbers, and he really did well. But all of that led to the preparation for university.
Yeah.
So we knew that my home said, you have a choice. When you graduate from high school, you're either going to go to the university or you're going to go into the military.
Wow.
And so my brother chose the military, which was not a bad choice because he was really good with math. He'd done all the math that the school offered. So he tested really high, and he actually immediately went into computers and high-tech stuff and missiles and things like that, and eventually became an engineer, electrical engineer. And myself, I went to the University of Arizona. Since none of us, no family member, I only had one family member that had ever gone to any kind of graduate school.
Okay.
And that was a cousin who had become a nurse and who had also been one of my Sunday school teachers. And then I was the first one in my family. So I had no idea how to prepare for college. At that time, we had to do the SAT test, and I didn't even know what that was. I went and took it, not knowing what it was, and I did pretty well, I guess, because the only school that I applied for was the University of Arizona, and I got it. So basically, when I left home at the age of 18, my whole life started to change. Because I went from a small town of 5,000 people to a school of 28,000 people.
Wow.
And I lived on campus. So I felt like a chick that had just hatched from an egg.
From an egg.
I loved it. Yeah.
And you did, what was your major?
I did a combination of psychology and education.
Oh, okay. Good. Yeah. All right. So I know that you worked or you served with Compassion International. How did that happen, and how was it for you to be overseas and just travel around the world?
Yeah. Well, when I graduated from the university, I taught, and then I taught for 3 years, and then I thought, well, there's got to be something else. And I went to work for the private owner of something like Home Depot, and it was the largest companies in Arizona, and I worked for them for 8 years. And during that time, I was put in charge of the place, and then they built a second place. I was put in charge of that, and I discovered that I could do really well. I was in charge of the places and learning, and high tech came in at that time, and I was working with high tech people and things like that. And I decided that after 8 years, I knew that was not necessarily going to be my life. So I wanted more education. And from childhood, I think what I'd call a ministry, I knew that my life was going to take us someplace, maybe out of the country. And I had always enjoyed anything that was international. I grew up with National Geographic magazines, things like that. So I decided to go to Thunderbird, and Thunderbird was the first international business school in the United States. It was very, very well done, and it was hard to get into. But I decided I'm going to go, and I applied, and they said, well, it's a business school, and you don't have a business background as far as business courses. You have to take some business courses. So I did. I did, I think, a couple semesters at a junior college and took all the business courses that I were required, economics and accounting, things like that. And then then I went on to the master's program. I earned an MBA in international business from that school, and once I earned that MBA, and my daughter was born at that time. So because we had gone to the University of Tucson, then we're now living in Phoenix. when I graduated with that MBA, we knew that we now needed to look for openings for international business. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know exactly how to proceed with that. Mm-hmm. I had lots of friends that had graduated, and they kind of gave me some ideas. And then they said, you need to go to another city. Mm-hmm. So I thought, I'm going to go to Denver. I don't know why I chose Denver, to be real honest. Maybe it's because I had a sister there. Mm. So I went on to Denver, and then, and very soon, while I was in Denver, I was employed by a company that took me to Colorado Springs. Mm. And so we were in Denver for less than a month, and then we moved to Colorado Springs, and probably right away in Colorado Springs, we met a director, an international program director or administrative director for Compassion International. And we met him because he was because he and his wife worked with the Scouts. Oh, okay. And we wanted our son to be in the Scouts. Okay. So we called the Scouts, and they said, well, why don't you meet with the Scout leaders in your neighborhood? So we went to meet with Scout leaders in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And when we met with them, I had a notebook with me. And the notebook had the Thunderbird label on it. So we're sitting there talking, and they're talking to us about the Scouts. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the conversation, when they agreed that, they'd like to have us put our son in that troop, they had said, but you have to volunteer to be part of the one of the volunteers to help. We said fine. Mm-hmm. Then the fellow that was interviewing us and getting to know us, he and his wife, he said, by the way, I need to ask you a question. He says, we're looking at that notebook. Mm-hmm. So where'd you get that? Mm-hmm. And I said, I graduated from Thunderbird. He's in an international business school. And he says, I did too.
Wow.
Yeah. So the international program director for Compassion International had gone to the same school.
Wow.
And all of a sudden there was a connect. Wow. There was a connect. We found out they were Christians because we hadn't talked about that. Uh-huh. And his wife, and then Linda and his wife became friends. We became friends. We worked together. Then, and Compassion National was new in Colorado Springs. Okay. They had recently moved from Chicago, and so they had a new building, and everything was new. And all the wives of all of the directors that had come out were all working in the office at that time. Okay. And they had just decided that they needed to stop that. They were there because of the transition from Chicago. And so the wife of our friend said, hey, what would you be, told Linda, would you like to work there? You can take my place. Mm-hmm. And Linda said, yeah. So Linda was actually employed by Compassion National before I was.
No way.
Yeah. Wow. She went to work for Compassion National for the program department.
Wow.
And she got to know the program director and well. And then in and they kind of knew about me because of the international person. And I would come and go and was friendly and things like that. But, I got to know them. And it turns out that they were looking for somebody to be in charge, to become the area director for South America. Mm-hmm. And they found out that was my background. My background was South America, Latin America, business in Latin America. It was Spanish and Portuguese. And, and a Christian. Yeah. And so they actually asked Linda, because Linda had not thought about going overseas. She had always lived close to home. Right. So then they asked Linda, do you think he'd be interested? And she said, you'd have to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
But she was shocked that she said, you have to talk to him. So they actually came to the house.
Wow.
The international program director and the person that would eventually become my boss came to my house. The one that would eventually become my boss, John Mitchell, he had been a chaplain in the military, in the Navy and the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And so they both came to the house. They talked to me about it. I was shocked. And I was happy and excited and everything. But I was also acting coy because I kept looking at Linda. I thought, this doesn't, I don't know where Linda's at in this thing. But I really was interested. Mm-hmm. And it turned out that, we were both on the same page at that time.
So where did you go first, and then, or what was your?
So the first thing they did, of course, is they formally interviewed me. Okay. And I had to go through a battery of tests. Right. All kinds of tests. From pretty much like
similar,
we do now.
Yeah.
And then they sent us to missionary internship. Mm-hmm. It used to be in Michigan, outside of Detroit. Mm-hmm. So we went there for a few months. Mm-hmm. And then they sent me for training in Dominican Republic. Mm-hmm. And I was there for a while. And then Haiti for a while, training and with different individuals. Mm-hmm. And then they said, okay, we're ready to send you. So it was, I believe, July of 1983. Mm-hmm. that we arrived in Quito, Ecuador. Okay. And that was the beginning of working in 5 countries, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. So we're going to shift a little bit now to the covenant. So how did you become part of the covenant, and what did you love about it, or how did that relationship start?
Okay. That's a really interesting one, because when we arrived in Colorado Springs, mm-hmm. The first job that I had in Colorado, we went to Denver, and then and then I was sent to Colorado Springs. Mm-hmm. I took a job with a corporation, and that was housed in Denver, mm-hmm. but they had an office in Colorado Springs. Okay. So they said, we want you, but we want you to be in our Colorado Springs. Can you move? We said, well, yeah, we did. We were renting an apartment and had barely rented it. So mm-hmm. said, yeah. So we moved to Colorado Springs. And it was real interesting because that company, there were 2 things that happened. Mm-hmm. The company said, there's a row of houses here and that have never been lived in. They're all brand new. Mm-hmm. And we're working with this company. Choose one. Wow. You can live in it until you find your own place and things. Cool. So we looked up the hill, and it was on a road that went uphill. And I remember forget the name of the street. It was called Purgatory.
Oh my goodness.
So we moved to a house in Purgatory, and because the house had never been lived in, it was brand new. It had no curtains, no furniture, had nothing except carpet, mm-hmm. and all we had was luggage. So we moved into that house on a Friday mm-hmm. with our luggage, mm-hmm. and I think that same day we went and got some paper mm-hmm. so we could put on the windows because there's no curtains. Yeah, we're gonna have to sleep on the floor, which is no big deal. We thought, we'll camp a couple days and get whatever we need. Our stuff is going to be, the company that we were with was going to bring all of our stuff up from Arizona. It was still in Arizona.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they were going to do it for free because they had trucks running all the time. Mm-hmm. So Friday night we're camping, Saturday we're camping, and then Saturday we say, Linda and I say, well, we've always been active in church.
Mm-hmm.
We're active in other organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to find a church, or
Right.
we need to start visiting churches and let's start with churches close by.
Mm-hmm.
And we were not going to, and we had by that time decided we weren't going to go to Presbyterian Church because for a few reasons, but the one we would have gone to was too far.
Okay.
And although we had already heard that it was a really active church.
Mm-hmm.
So we said, well, we saw a church just down the hill from where we are, and let's go to that first. So on Sunday, we went to, we got in the car.
Uh-huh.
We knew the sign was there, and
Mm-hmm.
and we got in the car, went to the church, and walked in and worshiped with them. There was one Latina there, and she was an employee.
Okay.
And I don't know if Rich Martinez would be called a Latino.
Right. Well, because of the last name.
Yeah. But he was there, but we didn't know he was Latino. But anyway, we went to the church, worshipped, and felt comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
And nothing unusual, and nothing,
Mm-hmm.
Just a nice church, and went home.
Okay.
And Monday morning, there was a knock on the door.
Mm-hmm.
And so I answered the door, and it was the pastor.
Wow.
So the pastor, I was shocked, first of all, that a pastor was visiting.
Right.
Says, how many pastors visit anybody? Newcomer or anybody?
Yeah.
And so he knocked on the door. I said, come on in. And he came in, and he looked around, and he said, what happened here? Because we're camping,
Yeah.
We just arrived, and there's nothing in the house.
Right.
And we explained, we just got hired, and
Mm-hmm.
this house was lent to us, and our luggage is
Mm-hmm.
here, but our stuff will be coming up in a
Mm-hmm.
month or so, so we're
Mm-hmm.
going to camp. So basically, that afternoon, the church was sending us stuff.
Wow.
They were sending us fold-up table and chairs and
Mm-hmm.
pots and pans, and
That's so sweet.
basically the church, the Covenant Church, Faith Covenant Church, adopted us.
Wow.
They took us in,
Mm-hmm.
and we felt so comfortable with them that we would never look for anything else.
Right.
We liked it.
Mm-hmm.
We liked them. We liked they were genuine, loving, caring Christians.
Yeah.
And we were all about the same thing, and and we liked it.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of that was in 1983.
Okay.
No, 1981. And that was the beginning of our life in the covenant. So, and right now, for the life of me, I cannot remember the name of the pastor, but the pastor eventually became the superintendent of the Northwest Conference.
Oh.
Strawberries
We'll find
are.
out in the archives.
Yeah, and the Strawberries were. Paul,
Okay.
I think.
Okay. All right.
And he passed away recently.
Okay.
And, but yeah, so that was the beginning.
Uh-huh.
So that church was our church home until 1997. From 1983, every time soon after that, we joined Compassion in 1983. So 1983, we left Colorado Springs to go to Ecuador to work in South America. Then in 1989, we came back for a few months to go to, in preparation to go to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So we were in Colorado Springs again. And then 1994, we came back from Africa to work in Central America and the Caribbean. And at that point, our office was going to be in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
So we were in Colorado Springs from 1994 until 1997.
Okay.
But that church was always our church.
Okay.
No matter who the pastor was.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Olson was one of our pastors. And no matter who the pastor was, that was our church and our friends. And even to this day, we go back, that would be our church.
Yeah. And then you came to California.
Then in 1997, that was when we decided that after having been in ministry from 1983 with Compassion International until 1997, that was when we decided that we needed more training.
Okay.
And so then we started researching, making a decision about where it was going to be, and we knew it was going to be in seminary. So that was the connect back to that original call. So it was our call, really, that original call from the age of 6 to Compassion National was part of that fulfillment of the call, but not complete.
Right.
And then 1997, continued education, although we had always been connected to ministries. Navigators was an important ministry for us, and other organizations, but Navigators for Linda, it was Walk Through the Bible, it was Bible Study Fellowship, and others. But we were always connected to ministries and always active in ministries and always active with people that were, so yeah.
All right. Well, it's like the flow is just perfect, because now my next question is, what has been your greatest joy in ministry?
Without a doubt, my greatest joy in ministry is to experience and to be part of watching others develop, to working with young leaders, and encouraging them, believing in them, opening doors for them, and providing places for them that were solid ministries.
Yeah.
And so it's a combination of things. I think it goes with my gift set. I'm a better leader when we're starting something new. I've heard that there's two kinds of leaders. There's the leader that's the pioneer, that has a pioneer spirit, and there's a leader that's a sustainer.
Right. Okay.
And I'm the pioneer.
Okay.
I love starting new things, and that's been my life. With Compassion National, I had I'm going to call it pure joy or blessing
Yes.
of being given new countries, or countries that had hardly anything, and being encouraged to structure them, grow them, plant them, develop them, and recruit leaders for them, and then watch them fly.
Right.
And so that's always been my greatest joy, and it's a joy for me. For example, just recently I came back from Kenya, and to meet leaders that when I left they were just babies in the leadership realm, and now they're grown men and women that are leading countries and leading organizations and things like that. Or yesterday I was going through my paperwork, and were you here yesterday? I don't know, and I don't know why it was here. A feasibility for study for Ethiopia, and I did the feasibility study for Ethiopia in 1991, and I was in charge of Africa. And I did the feasibility study, and then I went met before the board of Compassion National and the leadership, and I proposed that we open Ethiopia, and I met with all the leaders and things like that,
Okay.
and they approved it.
Wow.
That was in 1991. And this last time I went to Kenya, and I was doing research in both Kenya and Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started in Ethiopia, there was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
There was we had 11 denominations. I was meeting with the denominational leaders of the 11, and at that point we signed agreements. I did all the legal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And now Ethiopia for Compassion International has 110,000 kids.
Wow.
And, I'm not even sure how many different programs.
Yeah.
110,000 kids.
And
to me, that's like, it's not the number. It's the fact that there's a belief in knowing that the Lord's in things, and you don't, and there's a belief in the people that you're working with, they're going to move. And that was another conversation I had with one of the boards that I'm with for yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're working some really new, big things that are going to happen
Mm-hmm.
for America,
Mm-hmm.
and we're the first.
Mm-hmm.
And we were telling them, you need to read the proposals, and I've been reading the proposals as we've been working with them, and they're long.
Mm-hmm.
One of the proposals is like 28 pages long,
Wow.
with a lot of detail, and I've been reading them as we've been going through the drafts.
Mm-hmm.
And I told the board, okay, board, you haven't been reading them because we haven't sent them to you,
Mm-hmm.
but now we need to get those out next
Mm-hmm.
week. We need you to read them this week.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and think of it this way. Says we as a board, you as board members, we should all count ourselves blessed and privileged, because you are all participating in an event that's going to make history. And I think that's what we always have to be thinking about. That even where we're at right now, what is now and what will be in 20 years or 30 years will not look at all like what it is now. So every day that we're working, we stay with it, and we're working well with our leadership and really establishing sound foundations that are led through a spiritually, let the Lord guide us, but use all the secular tools that you can find, and you combine those two, good things are going to happen. So, to me, my greatest joy then is to know that those seeds that were planted have taken root in people and in places and in ministries. That's my greatest joy.
Good. Well, ministry can be overwhelming, and life takes us from places to places, and ministry takes us to places. But how did you practice self-care during those years of ministry and all the years that you've been involved?
Well, I would say I succeeded and failed. I succeeded as far as my walk in wherever I was, because I did a lot by myself. A lot. Internationally, I was in and out of all kinds of places that I was vulnerable. Vulnerable as a man, vulnerable physically, vulnerable as because I was working alone a lot of times, or vulnerable because my staff was so small. It's lots of times we were just two of us working. vulnerable because we were in and out of places that were really dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, there was war, there was guerrilla warfare, there was instability, all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I was never fearful,
Okay.
which was not a good practice. So I always felt like, just keep doing what you're doing. So basically, I was in and out of danger. I didn't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
I practiced self-care in the fact that I wasn't tempted by stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw people that were. And one of the guys that I trained with, he ended up in another part of the world by himself like I was. And he went down a different path,
Yeah.
And
Just kept your ground.
yeah, and it ruined his life.
Yeah.
And it ruined his marriage.
Mm.
And I just wasn't, for me it was do your ministry, be relational, do what you're supposed to be doing,
Right.
then go home.
Okay.
And be with your family and
Right.
enjoy your family, things like that.
That's good.
The downside of that is because I was so gung-ho in enjoying my ministry and enjoying being with others that I was gone from home a lot. So I was very close to my kids up until I joined Compassion International. Then from the time I joined Compassion International, it was like a scene in a play where I was close, but not as close as I had been before because I was traveling.
Yeah.
So I think that impacted. That definitely impacted my kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I considered you a leader that has been an intercultural bridge. You have been in so many places. You have been part of. You have taken your culture, but then you have also embraced other cultures. What is the best advice that you could give to others that are in similar situations in the younger generation? We've been talking about mentors and how important those have been for you. And so how could we learn from you? And what would be that advice to others as far as being the bridge and keeping it healthy? Because it's easy to fall into being the bridge, but believing that you're able to hold it together because it's of your own abilities. So, how to keep it humble, and so be on that side, because in culture, there's many things that we have to consider. So,
yeah.
I'm not sure if you understand the question.
Yeah, I do. I think that bridge building, I'll go kind of a backwards response.
Okay.
But we always knew, even from childhood, that we needed to learn how to bridge into the majority culture.
Okay.
One of the things I mentioned earlier is that my hometown was divided. And it was the majority culture and the non-majority culture, which Latinos. We had no African Americans at all.
Okay.
And we had to learn how to succeed or how to thrive or how to manage living and surviving in a majority culture, which so actually our parents advised us in many, many different ways as to how they would tell us, we want you to speak perfect Spanish or really good Spanish, but obey the rules.
Right.
Because the rules are that if you speak Spanish, you will get punished in school, things like that. and there was always kind of a double standard. So we were taught how to survive from childhood in the majority culture.
Okay.
So that was part of learning how to bridge, even from childhood. And my parents were smart, so they already had learned, and so they were teaching us how to do that.
That's good.
So we were bridging well through grade school and high school. I had no fears about bridging, so even when I went to the university, I was in a dorm, and a friend of mine came from my hometown and says, "Ed, there's a fraternity over here. Would you like to join the fraternity?" And I said, "Yeah." So I joined the fraternity. I was Don Latino.
Right.
It was a house with 85 guys.
Wow.
And so that was an education. I was being doubly educated. I was being educated academically, and I was also being double educated as far as knowing how to live in a different culture.
Right.
Because it was a different culture. Everything was different about it.
Okay.
From the food, the way we dressed, everything. And I wasn't not trying to be Latino. I was being Latino, but I was learning how to live. Right. And how to succeed, and how to thrive, and how to have fun, and really, it was a new world for me.
Right.
But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really was learning, and at the same time, I really didn't know a lot about my own culture.
Okay.
So I didn't become intentional about becoming a bridge until I graduated from the university. I graduated from the university, I got married, and Linda and I got married and I taught.
Okay.
And my second year of teaching, there was an international program where they chose 26 teachers, male and female, to study for a summer in Mexico. And so I was chosen, and Linda was going to stay home. She was pregnant. And so I got on a plane. I flew down to Mexico. That was my first real trip to Mexico, because I had been to the border, which is in Mexico, really.
Yeah.
But I flew down into southern Mexico, got off the plane, and that's when I discovered that everything that I had been learning about myself had not been true.
Wow.
About my own culture. Because growing up in my hometown, all the history that I learned was from a different perspective. The Pilgrims, Columbus came, and then Delgado, Ponce de Leon, and then all of a sudden there's Pilgrims.
Yeah.
And what happened between those 200 years? Well, we never studied that. And so it was all history from a U.S. perspective, which should be, because I was in the United States. But and my hometown, as I said before, was a divided town. So the number of school teachers that were Latino were maybe 4, even in high school, from grade school to high school. No business had Latinos, not the bank, nobody. Not even the mine. Any Latino that did anything was because they did it on their own. My dad had his own business by that time, electrician, but he did it on his own, And any other customers, not Latino, but basically all the leadership, all the professionals, all the doctors, all the lawyers, all the bankers, everybody non-Latino. So I grew up with almost that perspective
Right.
that Latinos are not the leaders. We're not the
Mm.
business people. We're not this.
Right.
I fly down to Mexico, to the University of Veracruz in Jalapa, get off the plane. All of a sudden, I'm in a university city,
Wow.
which is an incredibly beautiful city. I need to go back. In fact, we might do that next week.
Next week.
Yeah, we're being real flexible.
Wow. Jumping into retirement.
We might. Yeah.
That's
Anyway,
That's awesome.
I land in that city, and all the professors were Latino,
Right.
Mexican,
Mhm.
or from Latin America.
Mhm.
All the medical doctors were Latinos.
Mhm.
All the architects were Latinos.
Mhm.
The governor was Latino. We were living in the governor's home.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Everybody was Latino. All the artists were Latino.
What a shift.
All the leaders were Latino.
Right.
And I immediately told myself, I've been believing a lie about myself.
Mm.
And that's when I decided
Mm.
that this message
Mhm.
that I had been living, the stereotype about myself, I needed to bring that message back.
Mhm.
And that's when I intentionally became a bridge person.
Wow.
I need to bring that message back to my
Yeah.
own people.
So important.
Really, really, and that from that point on.
So it's like that you combine the leadership with, the business part, but then how God makes people, in His image, no matter what
All of
culture you're
that.
from.
All
That's
of that.
So great.
All of that,
So great.
Yeah, because we were already Christians, but we
Yeah.
haven't seen that part.
Right, you were not modeled.
Even in the church, we
Yeah.
had seen it in the church, but they were always the poor church,
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, everything was Latino, and it was being well run. The university was an incredible place. The town was an incredible place. The music was incredible. Everything was like a second birth. Like my first birth, my second birth was actually when I went to university. Went from 5,000 to 28,000 students.
Yeah.
My third birth, besides my Christian birth,
Yeah.
was when I flew
Wow.
into Jalapa and discovered our who we were, and our potential.
Wow.
And that's when I said, we've got to break this. And from that point on, it was through Christian circles and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It was a belief.
Yeah.
It was a belief. It was like any country I went into, whether it was Latin America or Africa or any place else, just because you're poor doesn't mean that you don't have potential.
Of course, yeah.
And also, just because you're poor doesn't mean that you're dumb.
Mm-hmm.
And I always used to think about my grandmother, who had absolutely no education, grew up someplace washing clothes in the streams, being a Bible teacher, because the church taught her. So I combined the church being the place where education can take place, and at any age, and that's one of the reasons I've been here too, because I really see that.
Yeah. Well, it's marvelous to know that every circumstance or situation has shaped you to be that, and of course, when you talk about family, you talk about mentorship, you talk about exposure, because it's not until you decide to move out that it's actually the learning experience of being in a different place. And so God then, of course, has taken that for you to come to Chet. So, and I see also that relationships have been key into that. Yeah. So you've served as president for Chet for 12 years. Tell us one joy and one challenge. And I know that's really difficult. I mean, and you've already shared about your own development and your own joys as a leader, as a Christian, as a minister. But when you think about Chet, what's been the greatest joy? But then what else has been the greatest challenge?
Yeah. I already talked about the about seeing people develop and become and fly. So people like yourselves and like Danny Martinez and so many others are serving in their home church and beyond their home church. They're serving the Apostle Roberto. He's all over the world, opening new churches, and Danny's superintending someplace, and others. All of those are joys. But part of my joy then also goes back to the story about helping things develop. And I did not realize, I didn't even think about it. When I came to Chet in 1997, as a board member, or 1998, something like that.
Yeah.
Chet was only 10 years old.
Yeah.
I never even thought about it as 10 years old. To me, it was like, this is what it looks like now, but I couldn't see it the way it looked like now. I saw it like the way it looks, not even today.
Wow.
Like what it looks like 20 years from now.
Wow.
That's the way I saw it.
That's incredible.
And so for me, in order to get there, all of these things needed to be done, which was something that I've learned over the years. Starting new countries and opening new countries and starting new projects and infrastructure and things like that. All of that needs to be in place. Yeah. But all of that I was doing was in Christian circles. You combine the two, So one is a joy of seeing that still happening, and then we're not there yet, but we're well along the way. We could ruin it today, and hopefully we won't, but we're well along the way. And at the same time, because I always thought about it way down the road, it bothered me that we weren't on the center of the radar with our own denomination. And that to me bothered me. But I didn't realize that we hadn't really earned, I don't know if this is the place to be in the center of the radar. So when I joined Chat and I went to the first meetings, I thought, why don't these people know who we are? They never heard of it. Half the people didn't know who we were. And I explained, they'd look at me like a deer in the headlights, who's Chat? And to me it was like, you're supposed to know who we are. This is an important organization on the West Coast that's really doing some big work. Right. So that bothered me, not knowing that.
That was going to be the drive.
Yeah. So to me, now that Chet is recognized as an affiliate of the Covenant, is recognized nationally by different organizations. I happen to be called into national organizations because of Chet, not because of myself. That to me is fulfilling for Chet,
right?
Because it's being recognized as a solid institution, Bible institution that's really doing good work. And yet, we're still small, but because I'm visiting so many schools, our size is actually the size and the number of people that we're training in many ways is equal to or greater than a lot of the accredited schools in the United States.
That's great.
So that's the plus and the minus, I think. I think.
Well, the challenge took you to the greatest joy, I think.
Yeah.
From what I can hear and from what we've experienced working together, is the fact that what bothered you, what began as a bother or as something that you thought it was not right, drove you into then what Chet is now. Right. And of course, God put that
and it still has a lot to it.
Of course,
But we've taken some huge steps.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we'll close this with you closing a chapter in your life and retiring as of a few hours from now.
I know.
And
not on Halloween.
No.
And All Saints Day.
And All Saints Day tomorrow, Santos. Yeah. And maybe you want to pause to think about that after I ask the question. But what is it that you want your legacy to be?
I don't think that I've never thought of myself as my legacy being Ed, the writer, or Ed, the star. Mm-hmm. I'm the catalyst to have helped a lot of individuals and organizations and people to develop. Mm-hmm. So, when I was looking at some of the books that I have here, and I saw Blessed to be Blessed, the International Jubilee, a lot of organizations in the past. Mm-hmm. Kenya developing solidly, Rwanda last Sunday growing, Ethiopia. I can't put my name on any of those lists. Leaders, Julius Sankock, hiring him out of being a herder to him working internationally, and Ed Lusay, who's in charge of South America, and I hired him out of Kenya. Daniel Garrido, who was superintendent for the Alliance churches in Western United States. What's his name? Mesa, who's in charge of the compassion ministries for the Nazarenes in South America. People like that. I mean, just all over the world. Shafaro, who's in charge of Africa for program. That to me, that's my legacy without having to be in lights. That's my satisfaction.
Well, when you think of catalyst, that's one part that is not seen.
Yeah.
But it has so much to do with how it drives.
Yeah.
And so this is a word that I've been embracing lately because I've heard it for a long time. But, when you think about it, what it does, you think about the car and all the engine and all that kind of stuff. And so to me, it has been the joy to be that with you, learning from you and just being able to not look for namesaking. I mean, it's not about that. But, I think about Philippians. It says that somos luminarias, right? We are stars in the heavens. And one star looks very bright, by itself. But when they're all together, it's the light that they bring together. And not only the light and everything, but it looks beautiful.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, that's...
Yeah, to me, it's surprising when I'm invited to places. It still surprises me. Yeah. Being a Latino in ATS from the school. Yeah. Because of the school. Right. They wouldn't have invited me if the school hadn't achieved something that is being heard of. Exactly. So I'm there. But I don't see it as a position of pride. Right. it's still a position of work.
Well, a lot.
You know, a lot of work. And you see me.
I always think of it like a sponge because
Oh,
you
my
know
gosh.
when you are part of something like that, they're a sponge to absorb, and of course then to squeeze it and then give it out to others. And I think
Yeah.
about that because catalyst again. It's you receive it, but then you have to send it out.
And you're still the bridge person.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not a bridge person there because I'm Latino.
Right.
I'm a bridge person there because I'm a Bible Institute leader in a non-Bible Institute environment.
Wow.
There isn't anybody.
Mm-hmm.
They're all seminaries. They're all from university. I'm the only one. This was a trial.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this makes me a bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I'm trying to do my best for everybody else that I'm opening doors for.
Course.
That's the bridge.
Uh-huh.
With Ayet, I've been on that board, but I really believe in what they're doing and what we're doing.
Yeah.
That Ayet is going to become the ATS in Spanish. It's going to be.
That's awesome.
And we're making that happen.
Mm-hmm.
That again is another bridge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, and it's not because we're trying to break anything down.
Right.
It's because it's needed.
Yeah, definitely.
It's needed.
Definitely.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. I hope that that this will be a new stage of your life where you will continue to do that. It'll just be different, but you still have so much to do and so much to give. And I was talking earlier to Marcelo when he came to visit, and exactly is that the seasons of life take you to still do ministry, but in such a different way.
Right.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Hopefully it'll record.
Oh.
Was it recording? Or did it go to
It's still
sleep?
recording, actually.
Okay.